Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're going to paint a simple, rustic flower arrangement still life. I promise that this is a simple enough painting for even an absolute beginner. Just make sure to give yourself the time and have the patience to really get into the details so that you can get it to look the way that you want it to. Now before we get started, make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and then hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so that you can paint with me every week. Now let's get started. Okay, today as always, I am starting with a 12 by 16 inch canvas. This is fresh out of the package. I have not gessoed it or prepared the canvas in any way. Now I do get a lot of questions about why don't I ever gesso my canvas? Well, the short answer is that commercially purchased canvases like this one, they're already gessoed, primed. They already have a coating on them that makes the canvas ready to accept the paint. Now you can add additional gesso if you like in order to smooth out the texture or change it a little bit, but it's not required. If you look at the back of a canvas, this is actually the unprimed, untreated canvas. This you would absolutely want to gesso this, otherwise the paint and moisture is just all going to absorb into this texture and it's going to be near impossible to spread the paint properly. So commercially sold canvases like this are already gessoed. So that's why I typically don't. If I need to change the texture, I will, but I always tell you when I do that. Now we're going to start by just sketching out our basic elements, and I'm just going to use a regular pencil. And I'm going to sketch out the table and my vase. Now I am going to end up painting over my vase, but the reason I'm going to sketch it is because putting the vase on there after I've sketched the table helps me make sure that I like the perspective of my table. So if you're unsure, just sketch it very lightly. I'm going to use quite dark lines so that you can see my pencil marks. I'm going to start with my table right about coming off of the canvas right about in the center. It doesn't have to be real exact. We're just going to say right about there is where the edge of my table leaves the canvas. And I think I'm going to have the corner be about 2.5, 3 inches up from the bottom. So we're going to measure this out pretty precisely today, I think. So I'm going to put this here, make sure that it's level, straight up and down. And I'm going to put a mark. Let's cut the difference and say 2 3/4. That's about where my tabletop is going to stop. I'll bring it down about 1 inch. I'm actually going to bring it in just a little bit farther. I feel like that's just too far to the edge. So pay no attention to that line. So let's go ahead and connect those lines. And there's the edge of our table. And at the bottom here, we want to make sure that we get this level. This line needs to follow this line. Sometimes, for me anyway, the temptation is there to try and make this line here be the same distance as this, and that's going to make your line crooked. So one thing you can do is measure exactly how long that line is, and it is about exactly 1 inch. So in just a couple places on my line here, I am going to measure about 1 inch down. And then we can connect those lines. Now for the line back here, this is where it can get tricky and throw off your perspective. You want to make sure that this line is not perfectly straight because that'll skew your perspective. So we want it to be at a little bit of an angle up, but if it's angled up too much, it's going to look like you're looking down onto the tabletop a little bit too much. So I did 2 3/4 inch up here. Let's take it up just a little bit. I'm going to go about 3 3/4 inch over here. So I'm just going to make a little mark right on the edge, 3 3/4 inch up the side. And then I'm going to draw a line from point A to point B. I think that'll be pretty good, but we'll be able to tell better once the vase is on the table. Let's give our table just a little bit of a leg in here. Make sure it's straight up and down. Use your ruler if you need to. Now, we don't have to get real precise with where we place the vase because for now, we're just sketching it on here quickly to make sure that our perspective is right. Make sure that the vase agrees with the perspective of the table. So I'm just gonna kind of say the bottom of my vase is gonna be right about there. It's generally gonna come up about like that. It's probably gonna be totally shaped different than this. Like I said, I'm just trying to make sure that it looks like it's sitting on the table and not like it's about to slide off. So that's generally my vase. And I feel like that looks like it's sitting on the table pretty good. So I'm gonna call that good. Let's kind of sketch out the fabric. Now this is fabric, so it might be a little rumpled. It doesn't have to, you know, be laying in any particular direction. It doesn't have to have straight lines in it. I might even put just like a little crinkle up right over there. The only part where it really matters is right here where it comes off of the edge of the table. We want to make sure that it goes straight down. And that's it. Those are the basic elements of our painting. All of the flowers will come later. Let's go ahead and paint in all of the elements. Okay, so I have titanium white, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber. And I'm gonna use this color combination on the vast majority of this painting. I'm gonna start with my 1-inch flat brush, just kind of wet it in my jar and wipe it pretty good on the edge. And again, I've got my cleaning jar here, so if you see at any point a brush just sitting in there, feel free to call me out on it. I am gonna pull a little bit of each of these colors out. For the wall, I think I want it to lean just a little bit more on the blue side, but every time I come back for more paint, it's gonna be a little bit different, so there may be some areas that are a little bit browner, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not picking up a ton of this color because I want my background to stay pretty light. So just some, and we'll get just a little bit of white. Maybe just a little bit more. There we go. Now to cover this background, I want to make sure that I don't just plop my brush on here and deposit all of this paint into one area. Instead, I'm just going to pick a spot, use just the tip of my brush, see how my brush isn't really bending, and just lightly back and forth. That will help kind of deposit the paint and blend it. And as I need more paint, as it wears off of that end, I can push just a little bit harder on my brush and get more. For now, I feel like I'm doing pretty good. I don't need to do that just yet. Maybe right there. See, whenever I push a little bit harder, it deposits more, and then I can go back onto the tippy toe of my brush and just kind of spread it around. A little heavier there. Maybe let's get some more paint. I don't feel like I had enough of this dark color on there. So there we go, I picked up more and some white. Again, tippy toe pressure, just to start laying that down and spreading it. If I want to change that color, I feel like it's getting too monochromatic, a little heavier pressure to get some of that darker color off. See, now that the white is kind of wearing off, that's really what I'm getting, it's just the darker color. See, my colors are a little different every time I go back for more paint, and I really like that. I feel like it keeps it from, you know, looking too boring and flat. If you look at anything really in nature, including just a wall, look at a white wall. No matter what the lighting is like, there are going to be areas in that white wall that aren't pure white. In fact, probably very little of the wall is pure white. There's going to be little bits of light reflecting on it, shadows, maybe the colors of other things in the room are reflecting onto the wall and just changing it just a little bit. I think I'm going to pull just a little bit more of my dark mixture and a little bit less white as I move this way. Not worried about where my vase is, because like I said, that was just a sketch just to check my proportions and everything. I'm going to sketch it back on and paint it in once we're done filling in all of these areas. So see, it's just a little darker over here. I know you didn't get to see that because I wasn't paying attention to my camera. I was in the paint zone. I'm not terribly worried about that tabletop because I'm going to paint over whatever gets down into it anyway. Still just a little bit darker. And that blue, the fact that we let this color mixture lean a little closer to the blue side is going to help set it apart from the vase and the tabletop, which will be the same color combination, but it will lean closer on the brown side. Super light pressure, just to get rid of any brush stroke marks. Okay, I'm going to go to my 1/2 inch flat brush and wet it in my jar a bit. And we're going to paint in the table. I'm not going to pick up any white. I'm just going to pick up my blue-brown mixture. Pretty even. I think I'm going to keep them about 50-50. But again, it'll be a little different every time I come back for more paint. Now I can use the tip of my brush and make sure that I get a nice crisp edge to my tabletop. Just generally cutting around the fabric. I'm really only making sure that all of the white spots are covered. Now, Burnt Umber and Ultramarine Blue, both of those colors are fairly transparent. So I'm using the heavy body paints and it's still a bit transparent. That's just the nature of these colors. So don't struggle with that, and don't try and force them to not be transparent, because we are going to put a couple layers on top of it, so it doesn't really matter all that much. I can just see my pencil marks right in there. And I don't need to fill this in through here. That's going to be the cloth on my table. And our little table leg. Okay, I'm just going to take my brush and just wipe it off a little bit. I want to keep some of that color on there. I'm going to smear just a little extra blue into my brush, but I'm not really picking up any additional paint. It's very, very thin. And I'm going to get a good amount of white. See that? I picked up kind of a blob of white. And let's fill in our tabletop with this color. Don't worry about creating shadows. Don't worry about anything right now. Just fill it in with this very pale, very light color. Just focus on getting all of those little holes filled. Make sure the canvas doesn't show. I'm only picking up white right now. There was quite a bit of that color in my brush. I am going to give a bit of a crisp line where the fabric meets the tabletop. So use the tip of your brush to do that. Don't try and do it on the edge of your brush, on the side, because it'll get out of control and then you'll have to keep fixing your line, and pretty soon you'll either have a fuzzy line or a huge line. If it helps you to make each one of these planes a different color, so like, you know, make sure that you have a line there so that you remember where that is, go ahead and do that. I'm not terribly worried about it, but I'll go ahead and do it for your benefit so you can remember where that was. Okay, so that is our elements all blocked in except for our vase. So I am gonna let this dry, and then we'll come back and we'll sketch our vase down. Obviously, I don't wanna use my pencil and sketch while all of this paint is wet, so maybe 15-20 minutes. Okay, I accidentally started drawing us on here with pencil and then decided I wanted to use chalk. So I'm gonna go about 1.5 inches up the bottom. And I know that chalk doesn't show up real well there. Hopefully you can see that okay. And I'm going about 1.5 inches in as well. We'll just go straight up for now. Making my vase roughly 3 inches wide. And the top of it is about 6 3/4 inches or so from the bottom of the canvas. It's just going to be a very simple vase, and you can make yours as, you know, as simple or as complex as you like. Just kind of coming down off of the top there and giving it some nice little rounded shoulders. And I'll probably round those off and change the shape of them just a little bit as we start filling it in. Okay, I'm gonna take my 1/2 inch angle brush and wet it in my jar. Wipe a bit off on the edge. And I'm gonna load up with a blue-brown mixture. I don't care if it leans more toward the blue or the brown, but I'm not gonna add any white. So nice dark color, kind of like what we did on the table. And we can start filling in our shape. Now, if you're really not sure about the shape that you have on here, make it just a little bit smaller. Don't go right outside of your chalk lines. Keep it inside, because that will give you some room to make adjustments later on. So I'm gonna use the edge and just kind of start drawing that in. I'm gonna keep all of the corners quite rounded. That's gonna help it seem like a round vase. So just straight down and then kind of pull it in like that. And let's see, let's do this top part real quick. Just kind of at an angle or a curve. And I'm gonna pull that down and let it swoop into kind of the shoulder of the vase. Only really worrying about that outside shape right now. This canvas has quite a bit of texture, so filling something in perfectly with this soft angle brush is going to be a little challenging, so I might go to my 1/2 inch flat to actually fill in the vase, but we'll see. And we'll do this side, and I can already tell I'm going to have to make adjustments to the shoulders of my vase. Straight down the edge here. You know, another thing you can do if you're really not confident in drawing is to download an image of a vase that you like and print it off and trace it on there, or, you know, just practice, practice, practice. I know you guys hate it when I say practice, 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 but, you know, sometimes I think we underestimate the value of practice. Nice little curve down here at the bottom. And let's see. Yeah, let's pull this over just a little bit. I mean, this is a, you know, it's a rustic flower arrangement, kind of a country flower arrangement. So maybe this is a handmade vase as well. So it doesn't have to be real perfect. It can have some little bumps and wiggles in it. I might be okay with that. I think that's gonna be okay to start. I'm actually gonna go back to my 1/2 inch brush to fill this in, just because the bristles are much firmer, so it will really dig the paint down into the texture of that canvas, and I won't have to work so hard for it. See, so if you have a hard time filling in areas, like I hear a lot of people say that, you know, like when I'm painting my background, that they just don't get the coverage like that. And a lot of times when I ask people, it turns out that they're using a very soft brush, and that is gonna have a huge difference on how much your paint covers and whether or not you get those little white bits showing. So yeah, if you have a hard time getting coverage, just check how firm or soft your brush is. So my 1 inch and my 1/2 inch, like what I'm using here and what I used on the background, I had those made so that they were nice and firm, but they're not scratchy. They dig that paint right on into the canvas. Let's round that off just a little bit more right here. Or not round it off, kind of square it off just a little. It's a little bit more rounded than the other side. Now, I haven't painted all of the shadows and the highlights yet in my fabric. So if I need to make adjustments to my vase later, I can do that while I'm painting the shadows and highlights of the fabric. You know, if I get a little bit that gets outside of my shape of my vase, I can paint it over when I paint my fabric. Okay, I think that's not too bad. Okay, now we're gonna start adding our little onion plant flowers, and I'm gonna use a fan brush. Now, don't be afraid, we're not gonna use the fan brush in a typical fan brush way. This should be pretty easy for you. What I'm gonna do first is take the end of my fan brush, just tap it in here, get a little bit of that paint on here, and I'm gonna make a mark on my canvas where I feel like I want the center of these big flowers. So I know I want one over on this side, and I kind of want it off center from the vase. So let's say right about there. And let's do a taller one, maybe right about here. And another one that's kind of lower than this one and in a little bit farther from that one. And maybe we'll put that right about there. Okay, so I'm gonna wet my fan brush just a little bit in my water and just kind of tap it off on the paper towel. I'm not like wiping it and drying it off completely. I'm only gonna load up the paint on one corner of the brush. Now, if you happen to load it up on the entire brush, that's perfectly fine, but I'm only gonna be painting these flowers with one corner of the brush. So some brown and some blue. Flip it over, get some on the other side. So about like that. I'm gonna zoom it in here nice and tight so you can see how I'm gonna make this flower. So I'm gonna use the corner, and essentially I'm gonna be kind of crushing the corner like that. That's how I'm gonna be making this flower. Now, if you don't have a fan brush with these natural bristles, yours is just those soft bristles, that's probably not gonna work. So if you have any kind of a brush with these stiff natural bristles, use that instead. So I'm gonna take the corner of my brush and just kind of tap. I'm gonna kind of bring it around, almost in a half circle. I'm not worrying about making a perfect circle here. I want it to look kind of puffy. These are those little purple puffball flowers that grow on the top of onion plants. So let it be a little wild. Notice at the bottom though, it is almost flat. I'm not necessarily trying to make a flat spot there, but I'm not going out of my way to make it puffy like the rest of the flower. So don't intentionally come in here and draw a straight line. In fact, I'm gonna break that up just a little. I feel like that's just a little too flat. Make it as big as you want, the flower. I feel like that's probably good. Let's load up a little bit more paint, and we will do the one on the far right of the canvas. I'm gonna make it point in a little bit of a different direction, so we'll kind of go this way. can make it a little bit bigger or smaller, whatever you like. My paint's getting a little sticky, so I just dipped it in a tiny bit of water. There we go, much better. See how my corner's just kind of crushed? That's all I'm using. And a little bit more paint. We're gonna do one more of these puffy flowers and then we're gonna move on. I think I'm gonna make this one just a little bit smaller and I'm gonna try and angle it just a bit different from this one. I don't want it to be teeny, just a little bit smaller. I think that's good. It didn't end up being too much smaller, but that's fine. Also, I've had a lot of questions about this fan brush since we used it a couple weeks ago, and it should be available in my store on my website very, very soon. So check out the information iCard somewhere up in here, and that'll take you to my shop where you can find those fan brushes when they're in, as well as a couple others that are coming very, very soon. Okay. I'm gonna go now to my 1/4 inch angle brush and we're gonna do a few stems on these flowers. So as always, that blue-brown mixture. I promise we're gonna vary it up. I wanted to do this whole painting kind of monochromatic so that the colors really pop and show a little bit more. So I'm gonna take my angle brush so the point is up, and that's because I'm gonna start up and drag down. And if you crush that corner and you'll lose control of your line. So you sketch these on with a pencil if you're more comfortable. I'm perfectly comfortable just taking my line and going right into my vase. And don't be afraid to let your stems cross. I think if they cross, they look like they exist together a little bit more. I'm gonna come up to this one and start right in the middle of it. Make sure I'm going in the right direction. It's pointing up that way, so that's the way my stem wants to come from. So we'll bring it down, curve, let it cross over that one. I'm not worrying about my lines being fully formed right now because I am going to add some green to them later, so I can worry about that then. And this one points just a little bit more that way. So my stem is going to follow that and curve and back down. Actually, that doesn't really fit down into my vase. We'll do that. Maybe we'll cover that ugly little line there with something later on. I'm not too worried about it right now. Okay, I'm gonna go to my number 3 round brush and we're gonna add some leaves, and these leaves are super fun. So I wet it in my jar, get my blue-brown mixture. Now, I don't think I want leaves on each of these flowers, maybe just on a couple of them. So I feel like I want one right up in this area, and maybe this one needs one. I will have another flower or like a wheat type thing over here, so I don't think I'm gonna put a leaf on this one because I don't want it to contend with that. Okay, so I'm gonna take my brush, start right on my stem, and I'm gonna come up. Notice I'm not putting a lot of pressure, and I'm gonna kind of scribble just a little bit. And back down the other side, just a very general scribble. And connect it back where I started. A little bit more paint and we can fill this all in with that blue-brown color. I like these little jaggedy leaves. I think they're probably a little bit closer to thistle leaves than onion leaves, but I don't really care because this is a painting, not science class. And when I originally was going to do this painting, I was going to do thistles, but ultimately I really liked just kind of the fun, whimsical look of the little puffball flowers that grow on onion plants. But by the time I decided to change my mind, I had already got my heart set on the little spiky leaves like this. So we're mixing plants and I don't care. All right, let's do another one. So my color, and I'm gonna start maybe right about here and come out and kind of scribble a bit. And back down the other way. Meet it up there. And then of course fill it in. So today's painting is, I think it's a quite simple one. You know, we are spending a little bit of time on details and, you know, smaller brush strokes than maybe we do a lot of the time, particularly in the details, but really it's not anything that I think should be too challenging. Everything in this painting are things that we've done before. I feel like that's kind of got a empty spot. Let's just bring a little bit up like that. I like that. We'll just make an adjustment as we feel like it's needed. Okay, let's do our little cotton stick. So I'm gonna go to my number 6 round brush, wet it in my jar, and you guessed right, blue-brown mixture. Make sure you roll your brush so that it comes up and has a nice point onto it. And I'm gonna start somewhere up here, and I'm just gonna use the tip of my brush to start the stick and let my hand wiggle, kind of get some little elbows and interesting bits in that stick. Notice it's getting wider because I'm slowly putting just a little bit more pressure on my brush as I bring it down. Just make sure that it ends in your jar. Not terribly worried about it being fully formed. Again, like I said, I'm gonna add just a little bit of highlight onto it. We're not gonna get too crazy with the stick. I'm just gonna add a little bit to it later. So I'm just gonna make sure that all of those little holes are filled in, and then we'll move on. Let's go back to the 1/4 inch angle brush because we're gonna do some other little stems and stuff. For one more bit of flowers or grasses or whatever, then we can start working on details. Okay, so I'm gonna have a little bit that kind of looks like a piece of wheat or something over here. So my angle brush is pointed down because I'm actually gonna start down and go up. And I'm just gonna come from in here in my jar, very light pressure so I can get a thin line and bring it up to where I want the tip of that wheat bit to end. So it's not gonna be, you know, starting on the end of that. It's gonna take up about like that. Maybe just, let's take it up just a little bit farther. There. And we'll have another one that I think will come from here over into that. So I'm gonna start here. Light pressure so I have room to make adjustments if I need to. And again, you can sketch these on beforehand if you're not comfortable just freehanding it. And I'm gonna do one more right below it. Maybe in just a little bit. I'm gonna go back to my number 6 for this part, and I'm just gonna get a tiny bit of blue, mostly brown, but I still want that blue just to tone down the warmth of the brown. But I'm pretty much just picking up brown. And we're gonna start making the little wheat bit, and this is gonna be pretty simple. I'm just gonna take the tip of my brush and just kind of make a little tap. And that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try and keep it kind of tapered on the end there. It doesn't have to be all the way filled in. See, I've got some little spots where you can still see the background. Take it down through here and then taper it off like that. Let's do the next one down. We're gonna add a couple of colors to this. So this initial color doesn't really matter. You'll be able to see a hint of it. And we'll do our last one over here that's pointing up. So I'm just kind of tapping, my brush is just kind of bouncing. Make sure that I keep kind of a loose shape there. Let's add just a couple of leaves. Now these leaves, doing this might take some practice. If you're not comfortable with it, I want you to practice it, but let me show you basically what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use really light pressure. I'm gonna start, let's say that's the stem, okay? I'm gonna start on the stem with very light pressure, so I'm getting a thin line. As I come out, I'm gonna put full pressure on my brush, and then I'm lightly gonna roll it as I lift it to get a point. So by roll it, I mean I'm just gonna push it with my thumb, just a little bit, one way or the other. If you don't roll it, here's what will happen. So you start off nice, you get that nice wide shape, and then you just lift it. And that's not necessarily bad, but if you want a nice long point, you have to roll it just a little bit as you lift it. Otherwise it ends very abruptly and the end is not quite as defined. But that doesn't look bad, it's just different. And you are more than welcome to do your painting different. Okay, so I'm gonna do one right over here. I'm gonna start right here on the stem, pressure, and roll my brush lightly as I bring it up. Again, I'm not gonna do one on all three of these, probably just two of them. Let's do another one right here. Out, pressure, and lightly roll it as I bring it up. Let's smooth that in just a bit. There we go. Okay, now we can start adding some color in here to get these elements to really pop. So I'm gonna start with the cotton, and that's because the cotton is gonna be in the back. At least this flower is gonna overlap the cotton. So I'm gonna take my number 4 cloud brush, and I'm gonna use it dry. I'm just gonna grab the tiniest speck of this blue. There is a hint of brown in there, but do you see that? I did not pick up much. I'm not wanting to make this cotton blue. I just want to make sure that my white isn't pure white. So I just kind of tapped that off there, and I'm gonna grab a little bit of white and just kind of tap that too. And I'm gonna zoom you in close here while I do the first couple, and then I'll zoom you out so you can see how they look with everything else. So see, I don't have a ton of paint on here. It's just kind of a smear of that blue-white on one side of my brush. And your cotton doesn't have to be right on the stick. You can make some of it completely overlap. You can make some of it off of the stick a little bit. I'm just gonna start here and kind of scrub a little circular shape. That's quite blue. I'm gonna pick up just a hint more white. I do want to see that blue there a bit for a shadow color, but I don't want it to be crazy blue. And that's kind of crazy blue. I'm actually gonna add a hint of brown into that too, I think, just to gray it down a bit. Cotton is a very wild plant, so don't make a cotton ball, you know, a perfectly round circle. Let the edges be a little bit soft and crazy in some parts. Let's do one more. I'm not gonna pick up any blue or brown because I feel like I still have plenty on my brush. Let's do another one over here, maybe kind of off of the stick this time. It's touching it a little bit. I'm not putting a ton of pressure on my brush. Let's do one more and then I'll zoom you out. I'm gonna pick up just a hint of that blue-brown, just a tiny hint. I'm gonna put this one right here, and maybe these two touch just a little bit. If I feel like a line is too circular, I kind of go out and intentionally break it up. They touch just a little bit. Okay, let's do a few more. Maybe we've got one right here, pretty much on top of that stick. Let's put this one kind of off of the stick a bit. Don't try and avoid any of the other stems. Just pretend like the stems of these other flowers aren't even there. And one more, and I feel like that's probably good. I'll put this one right here. See, totally pretending those other stems aren't even there. Let's get some deep violet. If you don't have deep violet, you can mix like ultramarine and quinacridone or use diox or whatever else you like. And again, I'm just gonna lightly wet my fan brush, tap it on the paper towel, and I'm just gonna load this purple onto one corner. I'm gonna get a good amount of paint here. We'll come back up into our little puffball flower, and same thing, just kind of tap, and you won't be able to see that purple super well right now because it's dark with that dark color behind it, but you will in just a minute. Don't be afraid to go outside of that color, especially if you've decided you want to make the flower a little bit bigger. You can go outside of that first color that we did. That's not a big deal. And notice I didn't try and cover all of that dark color. You can still see it, particularly at the bottom here. Let's do that same thing to the other two flowers. Just tap that in there. We can take it outside of the shape a bit if we need to. That's not a big deal. But that dark color adds a nice base for the purple because this purple is quite transparent. And again, I am using the heavy body paints, but some colors, they're just naturally transparent. And it's just knowing which ones and, you know, kind of how to work with that. What's gonna look good with it. And a lot of that comes from experience. But you can get that experience, you know, from doing videos like this. Now you know that if you want to use purple, sometimes you have to use a really dark color as a base for it. It works as a shadow color and it gives it a place to kind of live so it doesn't seem so transparent. I'm just going to wipe some of that purple off of my brush. I'm not cleaning it. I'm just wiping some of it off. And I'm going to come into my white and just pick up a bit. I'm not picking up a ton. That might even be just a little too much. Right up here toward the corner. I'm not crushing it so much. See, I'm just kind of touching. Just gonna add some highlight. This purple is still wet on the flower, so it's blending with the white a little bit, and that's perfect. See, just touching lightly. Let's do the same thing over here. If you mush it too much here, then it's gonna blend in and you'll just get more of a solid color of purple, which is fine if that's what you want. Let's get just a tiny teensy bit more. I just kind of dipped the ends into that. I didn't like smush it in there. We'll just add a few more little bright pops. I'm even gonna go to the clean side of my brush, pick up white. Just so I don't keep transferring purple around. There we go. Much better. See, my brush isn't bending much. It's really just like that. That's it. You can take it outside of that shape even. All right, let's start adding some color details to our little wheatgrasses. So I'm gonna put out just a little bit of cadmium orange and a little bit of cadmium yellow medium. I'm gonna go back to my number 6, just slightly dampen it. And I'm gonna pick up some of my blue brown, mostly on the brown side again, just like before. The blue is just there to dull the brown a little. And let's come into the orange. Just pulled a bit of orange in, so now we have a brown that's just a bit on the brighter side. And I'm gonna do the same type of thing I did, except I'm really gonna kind of concentrate it toward the top of the plant. See how I'm not really taking it down into here? And again, you can take it outside of the shape. Let's do that on the bottom one here. Don't go too bright with your orange just yet. There will be plenty of time for that in just a few minutes. Let's pull a bit more orange into there. Still brown. Actually, I'm gonna go into my yellow too. Let's really start making that color kind of glow. And I'm gonna make smaller dabs. And again, it's just really up at this top side. Notice I'm not covering all of that color. You can still see those darker colors. I think that this really golden warm color is a super gorgeous contrast to the purple and the flowers that we did. Now I'm just going to take the tip of my brush and poke it straight into my yellow. So I have the tiniest little pinpoint of pure yellow on the tip of my brush, and I'm just going to use the very, very point. I'm just going to add little dots of this color here and there. Wherever I've got those other lighter colors. You'll see it's still very dark on the bottom. And we'll take care of the stems and leaves last, after we do the cotton. Because the cotton, like I said, it's going to be behind, and we overlapped some of the stems and leaves when we painted on the little cotton flowers. So we want to make sure that they're dry so we can paint the stems and leaves back over them, not drag a bunch of white into the stems of the other plants. Okay, I'm really going to do the same thing on this other little bit, little grassy bit, whatever it's called. It reminds me of one of the plants that I found in Colorado when I was making my paintbrushes. I think that's where I got the inspiration for this little bit. I don't know if you guys can hear all the noise out there today. It is so noisy. We've had jets going by, and now there's like construction or something. There was a jackhammer earlier. Some days at work here, it's super quiet and nice. Other days, it's so loud. Today is so loud. Well, let's pull a little yellow into that. There we go. I like that goldy color better. See, I think most of the time paintings like this, I hear people say all the time, oh, I think that's above my skill level. But I really don't think it is. You know, it's just about patience. If if you have the patience to sit and, you know, make these little dots, then you can do this painting. This is not a difficult painting. All right, let's work on our cotton again. Now, ironically, the white cotton is what we're gonna spend the most time on as far as the flowers are concerned. So I'm just drying my number 4 cloud brush off on a paper towel. I want it to be pretty dry. And I'm gonna come in here and I'm just grabbing white. Just a little poke of white. Can you see how much white is on my brush? Don't get too much, but you wanna get enough. So I'm gonna make some bright white spots on here. I'm not gonna try and cover all of this darker color that I put on there. I put it there for a reason, so we have a little bit of a shadow. Again, don't try to draw real hard edged, you know, perfect white circles. In fact, some of it I'm kind of tapping out so it fades a bit. That's gonna help us keep some of that darker color to get the illusion of a shadow in there. Some edges I will let be nice and firm like that. Very crisp edges. Other ones, kind of tap them out a little. Just like that. Let's do the next 2 and then I'll zoom you out so you can see all of them together. Make sure that you're not sticking your hand in wet paint. See, nice soft edges in some places. Not covering that darker color. It wasn't all that much darker, but now that I haven't covered it, you can tell it just adds a little bit of depth into there. If it's just a pure white ball, it's not really gonna look like an effective cotton ball. I'm gonna leave that back edge. This back edge was quite dark, and I think I'm gonna leave that. I'm just gonna do about like that. And you know, along the lines of saying that a painting is above your skill level, first of all, you don't really know until you try. Second of all, saying that something is above your skill level before you've tried it, I think kind of sets you up to struggle. If you go into it and you think, oh, this one's gonna be hard, this is above my skill level, then I think you go into it nervous and then you are definitely gonna struggle. But if you go into it with an attitude of, I'm gonna enjoy myself and I'm gonna learn something, then I think that you are much more likely to come out with an effective painting, whether or not that painting is above your skill level. But also, I think that trying things that you feel like you're not ready for is an excellent way to learn how to do something. You know, you push yourself just a little harder than normal, and it sets you up to learn. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my number 3 round brush, some water, and yep, some blue-black mixture. Kind of running out over there. I might have to get some more. And we're gonna add some of the little leaf or bud details to our cotton flowers. So I'm just gonna zoom you in on this one real quick, show you what I'm gonna do, and then I'll zoom you out so you can see how it works with all of them. I'm gonna take my brush and just wherever I want. The cotton flowers, they typically have like 4 little hard leaves that kind of grow up and into it, making it look like almost 4 cotton balls stuck together. But sometimes they fall away, so I'm not gonna worry about trying to make it look like 4 cotton balls stuck together. I'm just gonna give the impression of these little leaf bits. So I'm gonna start on an edge, it doesn't matter where. Put my brush there, kind of press it flat, pull it in, and I am turning it just a little bit so I can get a little point. And you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you want, wherever you want on here. Maybe I'll do another one there, a little bit shorter. And we can even bring one off of here to say that maybe it's kind of falling open. Okay, so that is what I'm gonna do on all of these. Just kind of pick a place. I'm almost just picking at random. Whatever place kind of stands out to me at first as being a good spot to put one. There's not really a lot of rhyme and reason to why I'm putting these where I am. I can even come in here and just paint in that stick a bit more if I feel like that was a bit too aggressive. And maybe we've got a little stem kind of holding on to that one. We'll do that. wherever you like, you can do these things. Let's bring a little leaf off of there. Notice I'm not terribly worried about my paint covering perfectly on here. Cotton is very fuzzy, so you know, maybe there's little bits of cotton that have escaped and they're kind of covering these little leafy bits. That's all right. Let's put one there. Kind of says that it's overlapping that other one. I think that is about good. While we have that blue-brown mixture on here, let's go ahead and add back in our stems that got covered up. So this stem here, just gonna take that right over top of the cotton flower and connect it back up with my stem, because I want this little flower in front of the cotton. I really want the cotton to be in the back, behind everything else. But you can make those decisions as you go. You know, if you decide, no, I really like my cotton, I want it to be in the front, then don't paint any of your stems back over. That's okay. Maybe I will leave that one behind it. That might be interesting. So I'm gonna leave the cotton covering that edge of that stem. Let's get our leaves filled in, and then we can move on to our vase, and we're about done. So I've got my blue-brown. I'm still using my number 3, mostly because I'm too lazy to change it. And I'm gonna mix some orange into there. Maybe just a little poke of yellow. Just get a nice warm color, a little bit of extra water. And I'm not gonna highlight this entire leaf. I'm just gonna kind of pick a few spots, and that's really about it. I might come back with the dark color again in a minute just to kind of swipe it in there. Just kind of accentuating the curve. Let's get a bit of extra water in there so I can cover those little holes. Tiny bit more yellow. And we can even come back, grab a bit of whatever warm color mixture you want to do. Doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to add a few highlights on the stems. I'm not going to completely outline these stems. Just pick a few places and add a bit of this color. Particularly right here where all of my stems start crossing, I do want to add some nice highlights in there, because that kind of helps your mind de-jumble it, rather than it just being a bunch of, you know, brown lines that are crossing. You can tell what goes to where and what's in front of where. So see, I took that orange line in front of the cotton stick, so now that's in the vase in front of the cotton. I'm even going to grab just a tiny pinch of this bright yellow. So you can just kind of skitter it on in a couple of places. I really encourage you not to outline the entire stem. If you outline the entire stem, it's going to give it that kind of cartoony look. Just accent. Don't outline, accent. Okay, I got another little pile of brown and blue because it was starting to get messy and used up there. So I'm gonna get some brown blue. I don't really care which way it's mixed. More on the blue, more on the brown, even, it doesn't matter. And I'm gonna get some yellow and mix it in there. I want a very dark green. Maybe a little bit lighter than that. There we go. And we're gonna start adding some highlights onto these leaves. So again, kind of like we did on like the wheat bits, I'm just kind of adding this loosely to the top edge. I'm working quickly, not out of, well, it is out of confidence, but it's also in an effort not to allow myself to just fill in this whole leaf. I want it to be just kind of painterly, kind of almost sporadic. Let's pull a bit more yellow into that and go a little bit lighter. And every time I add the lighter color, I add a little bit less of it. But when I say I'm working with confidence, it's because I know that if I don't like what I do here, I can take it away. I can add the dark color back over it and get rid of it. So there's really no reason to, you know, stress over it. Just a little poke of yellow, kind of like we did on the little grassy beds. And I'm gonna add just a hint of it through here. Nice bright highlight. And if I feel like that's too bright, which I might, we'll see what it looks like when it's done. But if I feel like it's too bright, I'll just add some of the dark green back over it. I think it's okay. Let's do the one up at the top. I'm gonna highlight it down the left side. You can highlight yours wherever you like. I just don't want to lose all of that dark color. Put it there for a reason, right? A little bit more yellow. And a little poke of yellow, just a tiny pinpoint. Almost just scratching it on there. My brush is barely touching. It's really just the paint that's touching. Not doing like a big flat brush stroke. See that? My brush is not bending hardly at all. Now again, I'm going to do the same thing on the stems. Just kind of highlight almost sporadically, drag it down an area, particularly where it crosses in front of something else, to kind of set it apart. And right down here, I think I'm going to cut it in front of those wheat bits. We'll make the wheat bits in the back. And a little tiny bit of yellow, and just add some strategic little slashes of a brighter highlight. Remember that one I left behind the cotton. And since it's behind the cotton, we'll say it's behind everything else. It's not going to cross in front of anything else. One more, and we're going to move on to the vase and table, and then we're done. Oh, I forgot that one. Let's bring that one in front of the cotton. So I just grabbed some of my darker color, and we'll take that right there in front of that cotton. We'll take it in front of that wheat as well. There. Ooh, I lied. we do want to highlight just ever so subtly. We're gonna spend about 3 seconds highlighting the stick for the cotton. So I got some blue brown and I'm gonna mix some orange into it. And I'm just gonna lightly just kind of sketch this on in a few places, maybe even on some of these little bits that are covering the cotton bud. See, not covering all of that stick, just insinuating a hint of this color on there. Maybe I'll even grab just a tiny bit of a brighter orange. Don't get carried away with it. Just adds a nice contrast to the greens and the purple in there. Just kind of tapping a hint of it into some of these, not all of them. All right, so for the vase, I'm gonna go to my 1/2 inch bright. Now, you have never seen this brush before. It's brand new. It's not even available at my shop yet, but it will be soon. If you don't have a brush like this, then just use something that you're comfortable with. If you'd wanna use an angle brush, that's perfectly fine. I'm gonna just grab some blue brown. I actually decided I wanna make the tiniest adjustment right here because my stem is too close to the edge there, and I feel like my vase is just a little off-shaped anyway, so I'm just gonna pull that edge out the tiniest bit. Make sure it's nice and blended in there. Don't worry about the chalk. Once it's completely dry, you can just take like a damp paper towel and wipe the chalk away. Not a big deal. Okay, so I'm gonna load up with blue brown. I mean, when I say load up, I mean my brush is full of it, but I don't have a chunk of paint on here. And I'm gonna come in and just swipe into a bit of my cadmium orange. And let's start adding some highlights. So I'm just gonna kind of dash it. See how light my pressure is? So it's almost dry brushing. You can go in all kinds of directions. You don't have to just go up and down. Pay attention to where the curves are. Remember, the curves would probably take the highlight a little bit more than like a flat spot. And please don't worry if you're looking at it and you're like, I don't like that little spot that I just did. There's a lot of little spots in here already that I don't like, but I know that I can change it. So for now, I'm just gonna let them be. I'm just getting that orange on there where I know I'm gonna want it. And then we'll come back in just a second and touch anything up. Let's put just a hint in here. Maybe just a hint on the top of this shoulder here. I want this corner to be quite dark, so I'm not gonna add any there yet. I'll put a little bit right in here. Now I can come back into my blue-brown. I'm gonna go a little heavier on the side of blue because that's a good shadow color. Maybe just a tiny bit more water. And the same very light pressure. See, my brush isn't bending. And because this brush is so soft, it's gonna leave a lot of the texture of the canvas anyway, which kind of helps us. So we're almost dry brushing, not quite. If you have a little spot there, you can just kind of tap it or scrub it out. I want the highlights on here to really just kind of insinuate. I don't want to spend a ton of time here. I know you guys, you saw me come in to highlight this and you're like, oh man, I thought this video was almost over. It is. We're not going to spend all day here, I promise. That was a little much, so I just put a little extra of that color over it. Just a tiny bit more orange. I really want to brighten it up right over here. And right here. See, because I have my brush double loaded, see how I've got all that brown on there? But I only picked up orange on the one side, so I can come in here and lay that down and flip it over and put heavier pressure and kind of blend it or dust it. So I lay down that orange, flip it over, and I can kind of smear it in or get rid of it, whatever I need to do. So again, orange on one side, not on the other. Just pull a little bit of it there, flip the brush over, and streak it in. I'm just mostly picking up blue now. There's still orange and brown and everything, but I'm mostly just picking up blue. Let's fill in this side because it's quite transparent. And this blue will work as a nice shadow color. Don't be afraid to blend it up into that orange. Don't keep them separate. Then you'll have a big line where the orange just stops and the blue just starts, and it's gonna be weird. All along this bottom edge, nice and dark. I'm even going to take just a hint of this darker color right in there. Make sure it's really dynamic. I clean my brush off, just kind of tap it on the paper towel. I'm going to get the tiniest little poke of white, just a tiny, tiny bit, and we'll just kind of pop a highlight in here. Now orange is still kind of wet, so it's blending just a bit. We can smear it with our finger if we need to. Don't get carried away with the white. But if you do, just paint it dark again and do it again. Just add a tiny bit of it there, and there, and a tiny bit more right here on the edge. See, almost kind of tapping into a line, but then I touch and kind of pull it back just a little bit. Helps give that illusion that it's rounded. There, I think I like that. Keep saying I'm done, and then I keep going back for more. You know how I am. I do that a lot. Okay, jar is done. Okay, on to the fabric on the table. I'm gonna stick with my 1/2 inch bright, pick up just let's just do blue and brown. A little bit heavier on the blue side, but still some brown in there. I'm just picking up blue and brown right now. And we're gonna create a shadow right under our jar. So I'm gonna start right about here and drag it across. All the way up into here. And just loosely pull it out. See, this brush being so soft, see how I'm getting a lot of the canvas texture? This canvas has so much texture, a lot more texture than the ones that I usually use. So I might actually, since I'm going such a dramatic color difference, I am gonna go back to my 1/2 inch flat just because I don't wanna deal with that texture. When I was messing with this painting this week, the canvas I was practicing on didn't have this much tooth. There we go. Okay, so that's about where I want my shadow to be. About like that. Let's grab some white, a good amount of white, start just outside of that color. I'm not putting a ton of pressure, it is kind of dry brushing, and pull it into that shadow color. Light pressure just to blend them together. Now your shadow should be about as dark as your vase, and mine isn't, so I might come back in a minute, but for now, we'll just go with this. Light pressure to get rid of some brush marks. Let's just keep getting some white. Fill in the rest of this. Watch your table edge. You want a definite color difference between the top and the side. If they're the same color, it's going to make it hard to tell that this bends down and goes that way. So I'm going to keep a hint of that blue-brown in there. We can go quite bright right here. And let's go nice and bright back here, right up on the edge of the fabric. It'll keep this from kind of being a dead spot. And we've got some light that's shining around the edge of the vase. I do feel like we'd have a hint of a shadow on our fabric right there because it's facing away from the light. Just kind of making up the shape of this fabric as I go, you guys, so you can do that too. Don't look at it and think, well, where is the fold? Well, the fold is where you make it. So right there, see how I almost drew a line? It's darker on this side, it's lighter on that side. So that helps it look like a fold. That says this part pops up and it's catching the light, and everything on the other side is a little bit more in shadow. And you get to decide where that is. Okay, I'm just going to wipe my brush off. And I picked up a good amount of white. We're going to do this edge of our table now. So I'm just going to streak that down. It's pretty much just going to be white right here. It's with that little blob. There we go. My white is starting to dry out. I just picked up a little extra water. Now I don't want a hard line between my two colors there, so I'm just going to finish that line. Wipe my brush a little bit, get a tiny poke of water on it, and I'm going to put my brush directly on that line between the two colors and just streak it. There we go. Now it's a little bit softer. It looks a little bit more natural. Let's finish up our tabletop and we're done. So I still have white on here. I'm just getting some blue-brown, so it's a little bit lighter than what's going on the table. And you can kind of reshape it, fill it back in wherever it got weird. Like right there. Not sure how that happened. That's all right. Make sure we redefine the edge of our table. not do much back in this area. Got a little light right here, much better. Just wiped off all that white and picked up my darker color. I do want it to be lighter on this corner, but not, that was a little grayed out for me. Hint of white, pop a little brightness in there. Make this edge quite bright. It's taking quite a bit of light. I just picked up some brown there. And I'm going to streak it back into that color. Good. I'm feeling pretty happy with this. I'm just going to fix up this top corner. And then I think I'm done. It was just a little light. So see, when I say you can fix anything, and confidence in painting, I think really stems from knowing that you can fix anything. You know, we get really nervous when we paint sometimes because we think, if I make a mistake, I don't know how to fix it. But experiment, you'll figure out how to fix it. But I promise you won't figure out how to fix it if you don't try. Just cleaning up that line with a little bit of a damp brush. There we go. I think this is about perfect. I'm just going to darken this shadow right here. Just a little bit of that blue-brown. I'm not going to repaint the whole table, I promise. Just the darkest part of this shadow. So you really shouldn't be able to see where the vase touches the table, where the vase and the shadow meet. They should be pretty close to the same value. And then I'm going to sign it. And there's your rustic flower arrangement still life. I hope that you enjoyed painting this with me, and I would love to see what you've done with it. Make sure you find me on both Facebook and Instagram so that you can share your version of this and any of my other videos with me. You can find links to both Facebook, Instagram, as well as my website in the video description below. On my website, you can find all kinds of fun things, image galleries, my blog, my paintbrushes, and other Art Monster swag, so make sure you check that out. Thank you as always for painting with me, everyone, and I'll see you next time.